Now, for a few minutes, we'll return to our Gospel in the Farmyard series, and I'll speak to the boys and to the girls. And we, of course, read in 1 Samuel chapter 6 and in the verse 10, "And the men did so, and took 2 milk kine, and tied them to the cart, and shut up their calves at home." It says in verse 12 of the same chapter, "And the kine took the straight way to the way of Bethshemesh, and went along the highway, lowing as they went, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. And the lords of the Philistines went after them unto the border of Bethshemesh." Now, last week, I introduced you to another farmyard animal, and that farmyard animal was called by Mark Sally, the cow. And here she's back again this week. Now, I've told you there's 27 references, boys and girls and young people, in the Bible to the word cow. 7 of them have the word cow, C-O-W. 20 have the word kine, K-I-N. And it's interesting that the Bible has a lot to say about cows. And that's what we've been thinking about, Sally the cow. And we talked last week about the breed of cow. I told you there was 37 different breeds of milk cows. But what have they all got in common? They're all cows. And just as boys and girls are different shapes and sizes and different colours, and some are smarter than others and some are taller than others, we're all the same. We're all identified as boys and girls, male and female. And of course, Sally, the cow, is a female cow. And then we talked about the birth of the cow. Remember that? The herd book. God is a book with your name in it, the book of life. The Bible talks about another book, the Lamb's book of life. And we asked the question, was your name in that book? But here's something else about the cow that I've been thinking about. All right, the bleating of the cow. Do you know that in the days of Samuel the prophet, the Ark of the Covenant was taken by the Philistines? And of course, they put it in the house of their god or gods. And one of the gods, called Dagon, was a false god, not the true and living God. He fell down before the Ark of the Covenant. And they set him up again, and he fell down again. And then, of course, they were plagued, and some began to be diseased, and many began to die. And then the Philistines get really frightened, and they said, well, look, we'll send the Ark of the Covenant back. And they put it in a cart, and they got 2 milk cows. That's what the Bible tells us. They had just given birth to new calves. They took the calves away from them, shut the calves up, hitched the 2 milk cows to the cart with the Ark of the Covenant on it. They put in 5 golden mice into that cart, and they sent it along the road, and they followed it. And the Bible tells us that the milk cows went lowing. Now, what does that mean? It means they were making a noise. They were bleating. They were mooing, or we could say the baying of the cow. And of course, whenever you take a calf from the cow, what does the cow do? Well, it roars. And if you go down to Ferndale sometime and you'll hear the roaring of a cow, you'll think, well, what's wrong with that cow? Well, it's just looking for the calf. And that was the picture there. And these calves went, as God was engineering and working behind the scenes, went along to the borderland of Bethshemesh, and that's where it stopped. And the children of Israel came and brought the Ark of the Covenant home. And I was thinking about that. You know, milk cows lowing, baying, making a noise. Why? Because they were looking for their children. And you mummies and daddies, maybe there's even a lesson here for you. Because the lesson is this, that you can cry to God for your children. You can make a noise when they're far from God and they're out in the world of sin. And you can pray that the Lord will have mercy upon them and that the Lord will bring them to repentance and faith in Christ. So there's the bleating of the cow. But something else very quickly this morning. The behavior of the cow. Do you know that cows are very silly animals? If you leave a gate open, boys and girls, what will happen? The cows will walk out. And when one walks out, the rest will follow. Isn't that very strange? Or if you don't put the string up right in the laneway and you want them to go straight ahead and you haven't closed the gap to the right or the left, what will they do? Will they come to that gap and there's no string? They're more than likely to turn to the right or turn to the left, whether it's into a field or down a lane or into somebody's garden. You see, cows are silly. Cows are unaware of their lost condition. Cows are unconcerned of any sudden danger. And that's very important. Left to themselves, they would break out through an open gate, a hole in the hedge, or if a string's down. And of course, aren't we silly as well? Because left to ourselves, we can be unconcerned about our lost condition. We can be unaware of sudden danger. We can be oblivious to that. Because that's what we're like by nature. That's because we're born in sin and shaped in iniquity. We have this bias to go away from God, even though God has given us many encouragements and many things to keep us fenced into himself. I'll tell you something else about the cow. Not only is it silly, but here's an irony. It can be sensible. Let me give you an illustration. The other day there, was it Friday, Saturday, very, very heavy rain in Northern Ireland. And if you were driving down the roads and up the roads like I was, and I looked into many fields, I have a habit of doing this now, just to see what the cows are doing, and they're all lying in at the root of the hedge. Isn't that very strange behaviour? But that's exactly what they do. When there's a storm, when there's bad weather, they're at the root of the hedge looking to find shelter. I'll tell you something else. Cows know their owner's voice. And you could go out, I know of farmers who could go out to the top of the lane, open the gate, and call the cows, and the cows all come. They come in at the milking time. I'll tell you something else about the cow. They're very picky what they eat. Very, very picky. And sometimes you could give them what you think is lovely grass, and they'll just go and lie down and chew their cud, and they'll not eat that grass because it's not sweet enough for them. And it's the same with silage. They eat a certain portion, but there's some things that they won't eat. They'll chew it a bit and spit it out and leave it lying. Something else about the cow. They're submissive. And do you know how they're submissive? If a farmer wants to control the cow, he'll put a halter on it. If you think of the Balmoral show, the Highland show, or any other show, the farmer will, he'll not just let the cow loose by itself. He'll have to walk round the ring with it, and he holds it by a halter. In other words, he brings it under control. And I was thinking, the behavior of the cow speaks to us. Because, you see, there's not a thing in the whole of creation that doesn't teach us. There's not a thing that we can't learn about God and our relationship with him, even through all these particular animals. And there's an application if we would only pause to think and lift them up into the highest spiritual realm and apply them in a spiritual sense. We can be silly in our behavior. And at the same time, in an irony way, we can be sensible. And at the same time, we have to learn to be submissive under the control of God through the redeeming power of Christ and the indwelling of his Spirit. Well, I'll have one other thing that I want to teach you about the cow, and I will leave it to next week in the will of God.